wanted to talk a little bit more about my 2019 year in books. And as you can see, some of the numbers that are out there for, again, my 2019 year in books. And it says right there 9,614 pages read across 33 books. So that's a lot of pages when you start to really sit back and think about it. And I read really a pretty good range of books. As you can see, the shortest book that I read was 44 pages. I actually didn't realize that it was 44 pages. Robert Dugani, The Academy, and it's part of a series of books that he has written that I actually really got into, and it constitute a pretty big portion of the number of books that I read over the course of the calendar year 2019. And the longest one I read, and it really felt like a long book, but it was actually very, very good, with a lot of deep inside information about what kind of goes on behind the scenes of a presidency. And that was 513 pages. And The President is Missing. That was a book that James Patterson wrote with President Bill Clinton, and it was a really highly publicized book, and they did a big tour and had all kinds of things going on to help promote the book. And it actually was a really interesting read. I was glad that I was able to pick it up and read it. I actually read it as a Kindle book, so it was kind of maybe a little bit different than reading it as a physical hardcover type book. But it was really good, and I really enjoyed it. Average length of books that I read was about 291 pages, so that probably indicates that I read a number of shorter books over the course of the calendar year 2019. Let's see what else we got going on here with numbers. The most popular book that I read was apparently My Sister's Grave, which is a really good book. I really enjoyed that. It was part of the Tracy Crosswhite series, if those of you who are familiar with that. So that was one I definitely enjoyed, and as well as probably it looks like 122,000 other people also enjoyed reading that book as well. Apparently the least popular book I read was a biography about Diana Ross, and I'm from Detroit, and I'm a big Motown person, and kind of interested in the history of Motown and some of the musicians that came out of Detroit or made maybe a name for themselves in Detroit. And so that was one that I wanted to read, and actually read that one pretty quickly. So it's too bad only 149 people read it, but it is a little bit of an older book, so maybe that's not necessarily a big surprise here. The highest rated book that I read over the calendar year on Goodreads is The Hate You Give, which is a very, very good book, and I really enjoyed reading that. I had the movie on my DVR, but I didn't want to watch the movie until I actually read the book, so it was really great to read the book and then to watch the movie, and I'm definitely glad that I did it in that order, reading the book first and then watching the movie. And then let's see, it's got my first review of the year was John C. Maxwell, who is a very good motivational speaker and really does a great job in his books of putting things in perspective. So if you've ever had a chance, or you ever get the chance, you should definitely read his books or watch some of his lectures. You can find many of them on YouTube. And then you can see some of the other books that I read over the course of the calendar year. And you can see in the bottom right corner there, Patrick Lencioni. I went on a big burst of reading Patrick Lencioni books, and I still have several of them to go, but that was certainly something that was very fun to read those books, because it does kind of the fable in the beginning, the kind of the fictional story, and the fictional story puts into context the nonfiction part of the book, which I thought was really good. Again, I definitely enjoyed that one. And so you can see some other ones. Again, a good mix of stories. You can see here the Perry Mason book right there in the middle. That's kind of a older book that I read, but I grew up, my dad was a big Perry Mason fan, so I ended up watching a little bit of Perry Mason as a kid, and thought maybe I'll try one of these books. And I think I'm going to end up reading some more of them, because they're really fast reads and kind of good mysteries with, of course, the courtroom stuff that you would expect with Perry Mason. And then some other books there. I read some Ian Fleming books, some of the James Bond books, so those are older books as well. And read, let's see, a couple more biographies. You can see over here on the right, I read a biography on Berry Gordy, who founded Motown in Detroit. And then in the middle, Arthur Ashe, who was a great hero to a great many people, a great humanitarian, kind of got his start, you might say, as a great tennis player, and then kind of transitioned into more of an activist role in his latter years. And you can see some more books. Alison Leota got on a little bit of a binge reading some of her books, and she had some really interesting ones. They were set in Michigan, so that was one of the things that kind of hooked me a little bit on those stories and kind of kept me going. And then after that, I kind of got into the Tracy Crosswhite series with Robert Degani. Then let's see, as we get to the end, some of the last books that I read. You can see James Patterson Swimsuit. That was a book that I kind of took me a long time to read it here. Let me see if I can cue that up a little bit better. It took me a while to read that one. I actually read it over the course of probably about 2 years before I finally decided that I really wanted to push through and make sure I finished that in calendar year 2019. A very interesting book that some people that I'm connected with on Goodreads had mixed views of it. Some people thought it was a little sexually graphic, maybe a little bit too much so in terms of not only the sex but the violence in there as well. And so that was definitely interesting to get those different perspectives on it. It was an interesting story, again with some Michigan roots in that story that helped get my attention there, but also was an interesting story just generally speaking. And then next to that one on the right is Jacqueline Woodson, If You Come Softly. That was a book that originally I read many years ago when it first came out, and I decided to read it again because I just thought it would be kind of interesting and a quick read. And it was really like reading the book for the first time because I had not read it in so long, and then to come back and actually read it again was kind of interesting, and I really enjoyed it. I think probably more so the second time around than I did when I read it the first time. And then in the bottom left corner, is Got to Give the People What They Want. It's kind of a biography on Jalen Rose, who's a Detroiter, played basketball at the University of Michigan and then in the NBA for a number of years, and he's transitioned into a great career in the media, broadcasting, and he's also doing some great work with the Jalen Rose Leadership Academy in Detroit, in his hometown, my hometown as well. And so it was really a great read, and for a guy that grew up and is about the same age as Jalen, and I remember so many things that he did, not only at the high school level, but also in college and just kind of following his career. So it was really interesting to get some kind of behind-the-scenes aspects of the stories from him that I knew a little bit about, or maybe knew in some cases a lot about, but didn't know everything. And so it was interesting to get those perspectives from him, and that was a book that I devoured probably in a day. And it's not exactly a short book, but I ended up just getting so into it that I just really read it fast, and it was a very easy read, and I think probably a lot of people for Detroit would probably find it likewise to be an easy and quick read. So that's a quick rundown of the books that I read in 2019. I think there's a couple others that didn't make it on Goodreads that I did end up reading, but we'll stick to these books here for the Goodreads challenge. So it was really a good year. I read a good mix of books, and I was really excited about the diversity of books that I read, and looking forward to kind of doing the same, but kicking it up a level in terms of the number of books that I'm going to pledge to read for calendar year 2020. So thank you for checking in on this video. If you would, please hit the like button. Also, if you would be so inclined, subscribe to the channel, and look forward to future content here on this channel as I continue to show the things that I'm going to be doing, not only from a reading standpoint, but from a writing standpoint over the course of the calendar year 2020.